Hello everybody, how you doing? My name is Adrian. This presentation is specific to why we move and some of the programming that we do at the Garlands. If we take a look at really what it comes down to, it really boils down to the question we get all the time is like, why in the world do we exercise? Why do we do this all the time? And when we break it out, we can kind of put it on a graphical interpretation and take a look at it in terms of an X and Y axis. And across the bottom of the X axis, every one of us has a minimal functional capacity. It's what it takes for our bodies to function day to day and just sustain life. And if we look at this across a timeline from roughly age 20, when we're kind of fully developed, and then as we go towards later in life, max probably age 100, some more, some less, you can kind of look at the gap that we have over time between an active lifestyle and an inactive lifestyle. And what we try to do as practitioners through programming is either give people the opportunity at any particular point of their lives to live a better life or perhaps live a longer life. So really it kind of boils down to that two-folded kind of bifurcated concept of living better longer. So we even know this to be true. We can show this in cases of studies and research that this holds true in cases of injury and illness. So if we do the same graph with the same minimal functional capacity across the same timeline, and we look at this with the space in between, if there is a case of some type of injury or illness, and you look at this from between the inactive and the active lifestyle, there's still a gap, right? There's still a margin to capitalize on and either live better longer, or live better or live longer, or it could be a combination of both. So really we know whether it's just straight linear or if there's some type of incident of injury, illness, we can go ahead and live a better life or a longer life. That's kind of what we're after with this. Let me move this guy out of the way over here. And there is or are a long list of diseases, right, that can all be tied to what's called hypokinetic type of illnesses. And these are illnesses just by definition of its name, hypo, without, or lacking, and kinetic movement. So diseases that are caused by lack of movement, cardiac conditions, respiratory conditions, hypertriglyceridemia, hyperlipidemia, diabetes, type 2 diabetes is one of them, orthopedic conditions, et cetera. And there's a ton of them, but there's also one very common medication that can be used for all of these, and it's exercise. So really what we're looking here is we're trying to have this live better, live longer mentality, but we're also trying to offset or eliminate, not eliminate the risk, but reduce the risk of these type of hypokinetic illnesses creeping into the picture as an individual lives longer. So as practitioners, we believe this and we know this, but if you were to go out and look at the components of wellness and maybe Google that up, you would find physical, psychological, emotional, social, spiritual, financial. Those are usually the main ones that come up. And on occasion, you'll find some other random ones. For us and what we do, we tend to focus a lot on the physical in here, right? And we focus on that as a driver to other things. And we know that as practitioners, that physical component really kind of sets the stage for everything else. And we know that there's a relationship between the physical and the emotional and the psychological and the social. We have a class, we get you out of your room, you're able to move around, you're in with other people. There's that psychological emotional component that's part of the social, which really is part of the physical. So we boil this down to that. We know the physical is huge for us here and what we try to do, but underlying that, you also have a psychological, emotional, and social. And I can get on my soapbox and start preaching about spiritual and financial, but it's kind of out of the context of what we're talking about today. But really, there's a relationship between the physical and the other items on this list. And in some regard, it's mutually beneficial, right? Good financial wellness, it's going to benefit everything else. Good spiritual wellness, it'll benefit everything else. Same with social, emotional, psychological. I can make the argument across the board for all of those. When we get into physical wellness and we break this out, you'll usually find cardiovascular, muscle strength, muscle endurance, flexibility, and body composition. For what we do in here, I tend to look at this and go, okay, body composition is not the key thing that I really want to focus on. If I have 5 things I'm trying to work on, body composition is kind of a lesser degree type of thing for us. And I would tend to look at this wheel and have it more like physical wellness is in the middle, is comprised of cardiovascular endurance, muscle strength, flexibility, and balance and coordination as opposed to the body composition. And let's just face it, when you're in a place like the Garlands and we're talking about trying to minimize slip and trips, it's huge, right? Because that can be the injury that is the start of every other injury or every other illness. So it's this instead of body composition. So balance and coordination that we replace. So let's take ourselves around this wheel real quick. We look at this, we got cardiovascular fitness. It's how well you can do things that involve the body at a moderate high intensity over time. And you'll look this up and you can probably find any number of research articles that will dictate 20 minutes, medium intensity. It'll require the use of large muscle groups, working rhythmically over 20 minutes. So you can find different research on this, but usually that's your sweet spot, about 20 minutes, give or take. Now, granted, if you have somebody who is deconditioned and are just starting to work out, that 20 minutes might look more like a 5-minute bout, 3-minute bout, 5-minute bout, 2-minute bout, to then add up to 20 minutes. And over time, a person can build up to more continuous type exercise or even more intense exercise and do so for 20 minutes. So let's take this another step around the wheel here. Muscle strength. If we look at muscle strength, it's how much force you can apply into a lift at any one given time. It has its place in what we do. You think of like a slip or trip, you don't catch yourself 15 times. You slip and trip, you catch yourself once. So you have to be able to have the balance and coordination and the strength to catch oneself to keep from falling. And this is kind of an important part as we go around this wheel, is to realize there's an interconnectedness between all of these. It's not just cardiovascular is mutually exclusive from strength, endurance, and flexibility. It's very symbiotic, and they work together to help a person remain well and keep a person out of trouble, like a slip or trip. So let's go ahead and go around the wheel a little bit further. Muscle endurance. We look at muscle endurance. It's the ability to contract over and over and over repetitively. So now you can kind of look at cardiovascular activity. Every time you push on that pedal, there's a muscle endurance component as well as a cardiovascular component. So again, it's this, they're definitely dovetailed together. They're not mutually exclusive from one another. That's 100% true. Both with muscle strength and endurance, you're going to have reduction of injury, stronger bones. You'll be able to complete your ADLs, activities of daily living, better. And you look at this in terms of how this now ties together around this wheel. We take this around the wheel a little bit further to flexibility. We're talking about more of like a fluidity of movement and flexibility, both static, sit and reach, or dynamic with movement. They both increase the efficacy and efficiency of movement. And we try to work with people to have them get stronger and be cardiovascularly fit. And sometimes we really have to push people into the flexibility component to get them to wrap themselves around the idea that this is part of a much bigger picture. You can't contract your bicep if your tricep is totally tight and doesn't allow the elbow to flex. You have to have flexibility and antagonistic muscle group to allow that to happen. So flexibility is key to allow this other stuff to happen. Now let's get into the balance and coordination. Oftentimes in group settings, we work a lot on tandem foot positions, standing on one foot, doing exercises, transitioning from one foot to the other. We want the body to be able to respond in both a static and dynamic environment, to be able to adapt to perhaps if there is a trip or slip, how the body can respond and be coordinated enough to keep from having a catastrophic incident. So when we look at static and dynamic, you can go, okay, static, stretching, perhaps a yoga pose. Dynamic, you could do like flow yoga, where you're going from one pose to the next pose to the next pose to the next pose in a series of poses. And both are great, both have their place, and quite frankly, both can be done in the comfort of your own home if you want to. You don't have to, walk yourself all the way over to the gym to be able to go and work out. And we talk a lot about how the amount of work that we do is important. If you look at really this whole exercise and fitness field, I don't care if it's a college football player or if it's somebody in the Garlands. What we're really after is applying a stimulus to the human organism to get a training response. This gentleman, Hans Selye, was a humanistic psychologist, if I can spit it out right, but he also did a number of studies where he applied an electrical shock to a single-celled organism and observed the response. Too little stimulus, it adapted a little bit, but only so much. Too much, became exhausted. And if it was too frequent, became exhausted. But if it was just right, he was able to get the adaptations that he wanted. So in our parlance, we look at how you take this electrical shocks, single-celled organism, and the idea of how you apply a stimulus and the response you get from that, and apply it, and then apply that and juxtaposition that to the human organism. Well, it's pretty easy to kind of compare and contrast, right? If we give you too little movement, it's not going to be as much a benefit as you want. Too much, we're going to overtrain you and put you in an overtrained state. But if we get just the right amount, we can program in this amount, but we can program in to have just the right amount of stimuli applied to the human body to get the response that we want. Any one of those things on that wheel, or those 5 components, we can program those in to get the response that we want. And we look at this from a training standpoint, where you have the general population in the middle. The athletic population are the folks that play football on Sundays, and soccer at a very high level, or baseball. There are 5 standard deviations out, maybe even 6 standard deviations out. Folks that are over here in the middle, you might have a weekend warrior, does a 5K, does a shamrock shuffle. People over here, perhaps they're somebody who just injured or twisted an ankle, they're doing some prehab rehab, or they're slightly deconditioned. Folks that are over here, now we're talking a different story, right? We're trying to slow that grind and trying to slow that grind down the hillside here. And what we're really after is, when you look at this, is an understanding of where people are and how we can slow this process. And it comes from applying the right stimulus. And it's going to be a little different for prehab, rehab, for general population and athletic population, and how these populations present dictate how we work and train with these individuals. And if we take this a step further and overlay the original concept of that space in between with the green line and the yellow line, where our goal is to have people live better longer, be in the green and get away from the yellow, and even worse, the red, right? So for us, it's slowing the erosive property of aging is really what we're after. And it comes from applying the right stimulus, the right programming, but also requires the end user to be able to be actively involved with this process and do their homework. So our big thing is we work on putting together a foundation. We have a foundation of wellness, just basic movement patterns. We then incorporate in something along the lines of cardiovascular endurance, muscle strength, muscle endurance, flexibility. And we work on these different areas and these different components of fitness and wellness to provide a foundation, the pillars, if you will, of health and wellness. And then we have increased fitness and function. And then we can build off of this and do all kinds of different stuff, which makes it really fun for us. So the things that you can do: continue to attend your group sessions, utilize the fitness center, go see Alex, go see Bethany, schedule some one-on-one sessions, get involved with maybe some walking groups, or go for a walk when the weather starts to break. You can even walk inside the building if you like, and try to do some things on your own inside your own room, whether it's stretching, some balance work, even some light strength work. These are all things that you can use to help you slow that erosive process that we call aging. Thank you so much.